Over the Hedge. Why is this movie so shoved in our long-term memory? I feel like this 2006 movie is the one all of us remember the most for some reason. We don't rewatch it these days, do we? Are people still watching Over the Hedge 17 years later? Well, I am today, as we're covering the scene that changed Over the Hedge. Had you asked 9-year-old me, I would have told you it's the moment all the bad guys get eviscerated by a machine so theoretically painful that I actually felt a little bit sick after watching it. I mean, they all still deserved it, but I didn't like the empathetic secondhand pain I was imagining during it. But no, this is a tale way bigger than evil laser cages and some big garden hedge, as the core of this story is all about finding your people. It's about sharing, and low-key about the conspicuous consumption under a capitalist society that produces too much waste and damages its environment. But rabies squirrel is super fast.
Air freshener, tomato juice, cork.
Cork, don't you dare!
So the scene we're gonna dissect is the turning point where it all goes wrong. RJ here is our raccoon protagonist who's been saddled with debt against a giant ominous bear and has joined a group of fellow critters to help raise up the assortment of food. Initially telling how it's for all of them, but in actuality is gonna be all for the bear. Betrayal at the heart of this new family, and it's all found out in the middle of the very last heist.
I've got about this long to hand over that wagon load of food to a homicidal bear. And if these spuddies aren't on the menu, then I will be.
And so, with the truth finally revealed and no time to explain, RJ must run out with his tail between his legs, abandoning the gang in the midst of disaster. And what's more... everyone else is caught and left behind. Left to the devices of a biohazardous house, the Karen to defeat all Karens, and an exterminator with an affinity for an exterminator with an affinity for unethical cruelty.
No, not humanely. As inhumanely as possible.
Cut to our real scene. It's the moment that RJ finally reunites with the bear. This main quest has been looming over his head the whole movie, and though we haven't seen him for a good hour now, it's time to actually confront the bear. With the good ending, if we had no context of the plot and development in the middle. Starting off high and wide as the lone wagon is pulled up the hill. Jittery and slow since this isn't really a moment of success, but one of bittersweetness.
Wow. Vincent.
And followed by a close-up shot of the same event. Like most scenes start out, first you have your wide establishing shot before zoning in on the topic of the scene. Except it's not just about RJ pulling the wagon anymore, our antagonist is now in focus, but only by audio. Keeps him ominous for the moment to reveal him slowly. We must fill in the gaps ourselves based off of the raccoon's expression alone.
So I was on my way down here to kill you.
Keeping up with that slow reveal as we switch to an eyeline match of sorts with this over-the-shoulder shot of RJ's perspective. Deep, dark woods with little to pass from as the bear is camouflaged within it. All the more scary that we can hear him, but not see him. Only until he moves and chooses to reveal himself do we realize where he is and what he's doing.
But I stopped to watch the show.
He's domineering both the conversation and the scene as he continues to reveal himself, nonchalantly walking forwards because he's completely unafraid of danger. Meanwhile, for RJ, Vincent stands tall and overbearing. All of the threat comes from the bear.
And I gotta say...
And if you weren't getting that this is a tense scene, RJ's reaction should tell you it all, as he has to look all the more vertically to even keep eye contact with Vincent, positively petrified against words that aren't even scary yet, though the delivery's pretty gruff. That's Nick Nolte for you, who I thought sounded exactly like the cast member for Carver in the Walking Dead game, but apparently that was someone else entirely. Still a badass villain voice.
That right there is a thing of beauty.
And then our shot of dominant malice turns to unexpected companionship. Not necessarily a genuine one, but unexpected nonetheless. As the bear steps closer and then leans down, taking his giant claws not to slash and poke, but to spin around and give RJ the same binoculars he had at the start of the scene. Figuratively and literally switching RJ to his team seemingly, as the betrayal the raccoon has committed to his own people is one that impresses even the bear. And now's our real eyeline match as we hop specifically into RJ's binocularly perspective, seeing the results of his actions. This whole time he's been turning a blind eye, walking away from the event so as to not think about it. But now that he's stopped, no longer chasing the bait of his food debt, he can turn around and witness with his own eyes the destruction he has left in his path by his own hands, with his prior family being hauled away in cages.
That is the most vicious, deceitful, self-serving thing I've ever seen.
Really hammering it home that RJ did a bad thing, whilst also presenting two very different character reactions to the same event. Of course, naturally, our evil villain bear is incredibly ecstatic over such a cool event, since he revels in it, and has done so himself many times in the past. But for RJ, this is an admission of guilt. The camera slowly moving closer and closer as the intensity of Vincent's words build, and the pressure grows on RJ to acknowledge the misdeeds that he's done. Removing his binoculars to showcase his distraught face, devastated to see the dire circumstances his friends are having to go through.
Classic RJ.
And what's more, this adds on to RJ's character establishing. He's always been the sly kind of character, obnoxiously making his way around and conniving his way through situations. The RJ we meet at the start is unheroic in many ways, just another overconfident douchebag, more than willing to step on a few other critters to get their way. But he's never had to address it fully like this, and he's never felt such a strong connection to other people before. This is RJ coming to terms with the kind of person he is, and coming to the decision of whether it's the kind of person he wants to be.
You take the food, and they take the fall.
Now full-on match-cutting to the words of Vincent and the actions on screen. The abduction pulling back with each shot to show more information of the context they are in, as well as bringing us back to RJ as he's having to handle this internal conflict within him. And as he just sighs to himself in despair, the exterminator drives off with an illegal U-turn because this guy is also an unredeemable antagonist of a character. It's seemingly the final chapter for the rest of the gang off to some undisclosed area and soon to be out of sight from RJ.
You keep this up, you're gonna end up just like me.
And there's the kicker. You keep this up and you'll end up just like Vincent. A badge of honor from Vincent's perspective, of course, but a marker of mistaken life choices to anyone else. What is this life that Vincent leads? He's alone, he's feared, and he's greedy. He hasn't got that familial comfort. He's not supported by any of those around him. He doesn't even get to enjoy the thrill of the hunt for food. It's just delivered to him mostly. He's a glorified loan shark. Or if anything, he's the closest example of becoming human-like, except in the late-stage capitalism outcome that this suburb is dealing with. And is that really a perfect life to lead? That's the subtext of the messaging. All while this line is being delivered, Vincent is right in the foreground, but he's not in focus. He looms over the majority of the frame as his influence has greatly obscured RJ's world onto the path of wrongdoing. But that's not the highlight right now. Even RJ isn't properly the focus of the shot. It's the van, way off in the background, careening to their murder spot. That is all RJ truly cares about right now, as that is the immediate danger, not for himself, but for everyone else that he holds dear. The bear doesn't matter in this moment, though his words are emblematic for what RJ wants to do for his next move. But you're halfway through the vid, so subscribe. If you haven't already. You could also follow, subscribe again for Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4, or follow and wait for nothing. I'm boycotting Twitter. Same for Twitch. Content.
Having everything you ever wanted.
But I already had that.
And there it is. It's your plot point 101. Your character from the very start of this movie may have wanted exactly this. He paid off all his debts and perhaps may have even earned the respect to eat some of it himself, or at the very least get the next batch for himself afterwards. But in enduring the events of this film, he's come to discover something else, a sense of comfort and support in a makeshift family. And though it's different to how he started, that is now everything he could have ever wanted. And what he has now is no longer aligned. Again, Vincent isn't the focus as he scoffs on some Pringles. We're keened in on RJ as he's tackling the internal decision for himself. It's the subjectivity that matters, not the objectivity.
What? Them? Who are you kidding?
And now, even as the bear notices RJ is stuck on looking the van, he comes around to join him as we too continue to witness the van making its directions at an intersection. Also, a fun little tidbit, look at this road design. This movie is also taking a stab at your classic American suburbs urban design planning, because this is desolate. It's not normal to be inaccessible to necessities without the use of cars, and this plastic, overproduced design layout is all the more fitting for the background themes of this movie. Anyway, sorry, just weird to see as a Brit. We're surrounded by 20-minute city designs, you know?
You said it yourself. You're a family of one. Always will be.
Yep, that's a line RJ said near the very start of the movie, the most emblematic line of the entire film in regards to its main theme.
I'm just a desperate guy trying to feed his family.
You don't have a family.
I'm in a family of one.
It's a family movie, and the independent lone wolf of a guy is to find his tribe and betray them across this movie. It's directly looping us back to the start of the film to see the progression our main protagonist has made, and it makes sense that Vincent is the one mentioning it, because not only was he there, but it's practically the last thing he heard from RJ. So it will be fresh in his mind.
It's how guys like you and me survive.
You and I. Anyway, the use of survive here is very manipulative here. They're not surviving because they deceive others, they're thriving. This isn't a last resort choice to save their own skin, it's done this time out of malice. They could comfortably gather food for themselves without shooting down others, but this is a cognitive choice. It's not a matter of survival, it's a matter of malice.
So a few saps got hurt in the process. Tough. That's life.
And now we have Vincent's perspective on the gang. Just a few saps, so he says. No words of respect or acknowledgement, just belittling them down to pejorative insults. And probably telling that he's had a few run-ins himself with fellow saps and chosen to let them get sacrificed along the way. If RJ is to fully commit to his action and remain on the path that mimics Vincent, then he too will have to look on to his friends as just sorry saps. Collateral damage, and that's clearly something he doesn't want to do.
Trust me, you don't need them.
Actually, I do.
But we're coming out onto the other side. Whilst Vincent is cemented on leaving others behind, RJ just doesn't have it in him. He's not that kind of person, or at least, not anymore. Against all of his new experiences, he's come to the conclusion that he does want to align with the family, and the camera now bolsters him up too, giving us a low angle of empowerment as he stands large on the frame, for possibly one of the first times ever this scene. Moving in on him as we reach the climax of his conclusion.
And right now, they really need me. So I really need this!
And with one last glance at the van, noticeably getting closer and closer to us, RJ rushes out of his designated spot, pushing on the giant food cart side on so we maximize its movements, the large load of it now not grinding him to a halt, but empowering his strength and resolve. And much easier to push down a hill than up. And that van heading southwards was signalizing that it was coming towards RJ the whole time. Of course! We were looking at his perspective, or at least his eyeline match, of course. So the actions up on the hill can impact the trajectory on the road, as the food cart now becomes a sort of battering ram to invade the van last minute along its commute. And from there, a whole action sequence explodes onto the frame, from food explosions to bear slashes, drama with the gang, and smashing windows, swinging around the driving, balloon savings, crashing the car, and dealing with a coming-to exterminator. But that is all very much a different scene. This short little scene here was the one I wanted to focus on because it's the key turning point for our character from a douchey, conniveling anti-hero to one who is part of the family. After a few minor rejections.
Thank you, yes.
This is the turning point of the movie that dictates his character the most, and it does so with some awfully in-your-face dialogue and a whole lot of eyeline matches. It's the turning point that literally has RJ stop in place, turn, and choose which action he wants to take. Though let's be honest, everyone's favourite scene was the Quicksilver one. We love a Quicksilver scene, and this was one of the first. At least it's not the one that made me want to vomit. That was the scene that changed Over the Hedge. For now, my name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit.